Hey, beautiful people, and welcome back to another soulful session of Mondays with Mondane. This is where we dive deep into the rhythm of life, love, liberty, and democracy. And of course, I'm your host, Edie Mondane, and I'm ready to groove through the beats of the week with you. So kick back, and let's get into the vital conversation. You know what? The beat goes on, but it's up to us to keep the rhythm of democracy alive. And it needs to kick. Let's do this together. Wow. Today I am deeply honored to welcome once again a very special guest, my sister and good friend, Rabbi Ariel Stone. Rabbi Ariel Stone is a trailblazer, the first American rabbi to lead a congregation in the former Soviet Union, and the first progressive rabbi to serve the Jewish community in Ukraine. She has dedicated her life to fostering understanding, healing divisions, and advocating for justice. For her work in Ukraine, to her leadership at Congregation Shir Tikva in Portland, Rabbi Stone continues to be a beacon of wisdom and resilience, a true testament to humanity. Rabbi Stone, my sister girl with a killer girl. It's a privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's very good to be back here and to see you and to have a chance to check in. These last couple of months have been, well, they've given us a lot to talk about.
Yeah. You know, our world conflict and division seem to dominate the headlines. Every day there's something different. The ongoing wars in Ukraine and Israel are heartbreaking, reminders of our shared humanity. And the pain that can tear us apart, the global family, the broader human family, it speaks to this idea that what affects one of us affects all of us. Here in America, we cannot turn a blind eye. We cannot to these atrocities that we're talking about. Recently, there was a pivotal meeting at the White House between Donald Trump, President Zelensky, and Vice President Kamala Harris. No, it wasn't Kamala Harris. It was the Vice President
Vance, that's
right.
You wish it was Kamala Harris.
This meeting, steeped in political maneuvering, raises critical questions about America's role in the crisis. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you something. What do you think America's moral and political response should be to the war in Ukraine?
I don't know if you've seen some of the commentaries I've seen that refer now to President Zelensky as the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
What's happening in the United States right now is that our standing on the world stage has become pitiful. And the most surprising part of it is how quickly we've gone from the illusions everybody knew we were all holding, the hypocrisies that everybody knew about, almost overnight. Almost overnight, the Europeans are talking about not being able to trust or rely on the United States anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's as if we were working off of assumptions that no longer held any substance to them.
Wow.
It's as if all we were really carrying was a great big balloon, and Donald Trump came with a big old pin.
Ooh.
And stuck a pin in that balloon, and there ain't nothing left.
You know, that brings us into this next question. How can we ensure that democracy is not just a word we use, but a value we protect globally? Everybody seems to be scared of the T, but that brother ought to be scared of me. Mm-hmm, and even scarer of we.
Amen.
What you think, girl?
Well, these are the times that are going to help us remember what it means to be resilient, or they're going to separate between people who can find resilience and people who are going to just panic and fall apart. Yeah. And I guarantee you there's both those kinds in the world, especially in this country where too many people have been too spoiled, too self-centered, too self-indulgent for too long. and a whole bunch of other people had been too beaten down, too busy holding it together to be able to care about a larger value like democracy. So we've got suffering on both sides here. One side is waking up to the truth, and the other side is saying, how many times was I going to have to tell you what the truth really is? Right? So we've got no sense of shared experience in this country. All we've had is lies people have been willing to entertain for the longest time. I adored President Obama, but every time he talked about American exceptionalism, I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to that. There's nothing exceptional about this country other than it may be exceptionally hypocritical.
Woo! And I think the exceptionalism comes from the thought of romance.
Right.
Yeah.
The way we wish we were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the way we grew up. You know, it was awful disparaging for me to see the rift between Trudeau and Trump, because every time I go to Canada, it feels as if I'm visiting my cousin's house.
Sure.
You know, and I'm always excited to be there. How dare us take that away from me? But the romanticism isn't real. So the real deal is what is. And I happen to know that it's not going to take the government to fix this. So, and I think that you think in similar ways, but I want to ask, in what ways do you see interfaith voices contributing to peace and reconciliation in conflict zones like Ukraine and Israel? How do you see that happening?
Well, it's actually going to need to be different going ahead than it was, right? Because interfaith work has to lift up equal strengths on all sides. So one of the things that used to be really cringy was when Jewish leaders and black leaders would get together at, I don't know, we'd all go marching over a bridge in Selma, or we'd sit down and have a freedom seder together. And those weren't actually interfaith moments. Those were moments of one side asking the other to express itself and then sharing in that expression, right? So if we're walking over the bridge in Selma, that's your lead.
Yeah.
And if we're having a Seder, that's my lead. But where do we actually meet equally? Right? And that's a little bit harder to figure out.
Where's that shared humanity?
How do we drill down to the shared humanity and get past all the other things, all the power differentials, right? How do we move past all of the traumas that shape our characters? How do we put those down so that we can actually find the strengths that are on the other side of those traumas? Yeah.
You know, talking about the shared humanities, what are the human stories we're missing when we only hear about the strategy and policy? What human, I mean, you've been right there. And unfortunately, you weren't there when they were tossing bombs around.
Thank God, right.
But you understand the struggle. So what are we missing beyond the politics and beyond the nonsense?
Well, I actually noticed something kind of interesting when I was in Ukraine. It was right after the fall of the Soviet Union. And people who had been believers in the Soviet system, people whose identities were defined by being Soviets, were completely at a loss because the Soviet Union had ceased to exist. So all of a sudden, they didn't have an identity. They didn't have anything that their identity was grounded in. But the people who had been persecuted under the Soviet regime, such as the Jews, it may have been bad to be a Jew, but at least they knew who they were. They had an identity they could fall back on.
Yeah.
Right? So part of this is underneath the forced romantic lies we've been telling each other about how we live. If we can have the courage to put that aside and look at what we really can share. I mean, can we do that? That's a radical kind of courage, and I think it only comes out of trust.
Yeah.
It only comes out of human relationship. And politics may be what happens whenever people get in a room and they all want something, right?
Yeah.
Politics is people pushing for what they want
Yeah.
against other people and what they want.
Yeah.
But politics doesn't get us to a shared humanity. Politics separates us into different diverse streams. There's nothing necessarily negative about that, but it doesn't bring us together. Everyone in politics talks about best case scenario, you're reaching across the aisle, right? That which is shared is in the aisle. How do we step into the aisle?
Wow.
Right?
Cleanup. The pickup, the do-up. And we have a responsibility as spiritual leaders, I think. and communities that we've been a part of, having times of global war and injustice showed up, and they showed up in the aisle. How do we do that now?
I think first thing we have to do is be very careful of each other's vulnerabilities.
Uh-oh.
At a time of Christian...
what does that mean? Be careful.
Well, what I want to say is when some Christian nationalists are coming to town, I'm not sure it's my job to be in the front row.
I don't think so.
Right? Right. But when it comes to when it comes to white supremacists coming after you, I'm a step in between the two.
Yeah.
Right? So you really can't say our partnership is going to look the same at every moment. It depends. We have to judge by the context of each challenge.
Yes.
Right? So the aisle, maybe a better way to think about it would be like a river, because it keeps changing.
Oh my God.
Right? There are rocks here, and then there's a drop off there, and then there's a waterfall, and if you're not careful, you'll fall over the edge of it. And it's constantly shifting.
Yeah.
Right? So I feel like life moves quickly, and there's so much going on in so many different groups. And so, but the truth is, right, my friend, that back in the day, I've told you this, back in the day, it all looked like it was all sweetness and light.
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at that photograph of Dr. King at the Washington Memorial, and you look at the 10 men behind him,
dude,
every one of them is wishing they were standing there in front of him.
Well, he wasn't very popular at that time.
All right.
As a matter of fact, I don't want to say this.
Yeah.
But it was kumbaya. And it was wonderful. It was gravitas.
Yes, it was. But right? After the fact, it's hard to see how hard it was at the time and how impossibly unclear it was.
Well, to speak to that spiritual element, it's wonderful that he had such a mantra of spirituality represented in Miss Mahalia Jackson, who outshined all that hate.
Amen.
What do you think the responsibility of the spiritual leadership is right now? And how do you contrast the moral clarity that needs to actually show up and show out at this moment? What should be the message that is spoken from both sides of the aisle? And how do we synthesize that?
We both share the love of the prophets. We both share the respect for their truth. There's a prophetic image of a plumb line. Plumb line, I didn't know what it was either until I looked it up. A plumb line is the very ancient way of making sure the wall you're building is straight up and down.
Yeah.
You get a piece of string and you put a weight on the bottom. That's your plumb line. It's plumb straight. Right? It is plumb. I guess that means straight up and down.
Yeah.
So you get at the top of the wall and you use that to see if it's straight. So God uses the image of the plumb line to talk about the truth and talk about integrity to the prophets. Truth is a plumb line. Truth doesn't sway to one side or the other. I think what spiritual leadership has to do is be radically dedicated to truth despite the ramifications and the fallout.
Well, I think the Torah talks about the truth being the rock. Is that what it is?
Absolutely.
And then the Bible speaks of it in saying, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall...
It will whack you up. When you run into that rock, it knocks everything else off of you. It makes you free.
Make you free.
That's right.
Give us free. The moral clarity that needs to be succinct, and it needs to be grounded in not just hope, but it has to be grounded in Well, one of the things that we deal with in our faith is the substance of things hoped for the evidence of things not seen. When we're seeing bodies of children every day being blown apart, and we're seeing, it's just tragic. How and what do we say to a dying world that's looking at this? And then they're looking at the leadership in the United States of America that is saying, where does our hope come from? And how do I trust this faith? That's what it's going to take.
Well, it's going to help us clarify that our hope does not come from the United States. Let me not trust in princes, right? So one of our big problems is we want to trust in something that's close to us and it's clear. So we follow the first strong person we see, and we want to trust them. And then we start to let ourselves be lied to because we want to trust them. And then they let us down and we still want to trust them. So it's okay one of my kids died of measles, the others recovered.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a way in which we need to be able to find a way to say loudly, you got to move past those false gods.
That clarity comes through grassroots communities versus the ambiguity of political leadership.
It comes from actual lived experience. It comes from disappointment and living through it. It comes from developing resilience enough to know that just because you've been hurt doesn't mean the game is over.
Dude. And then there's that. And then there's that. There's a lot to digest. There's a lot to talk about. And with this 47, he graduated. And then they're talking about 50 and muscling something in there. We never thought it could happen before. Why wouldn't it happen again? What's going to stop this atrocity? I've got an idea, but what do you think?
I have a deeply rooted Jewish sense of, well, it's not despair, but it's a real historical sense that things play themselves out and that there are spasms that happen in our world. And just like a spasm in your body that you have to wait till it's over, I am afraid that this is a spasm that we cannot stop.
Oh, yeah.
That it's like a tsunami, that the only thing we can do, we can see it coming, there's no force on earth that's going to stop it. All we can do is determine how we're going to hold on, what we're going to hold on to, who we're going to hold on with, and what's worth holding on to.
Yeah.
And then just hold on.
When you say tsunami, it talks to me about the prophetic vision that Dr. King had in 60, I can't recall the year, but as he was lecturing, he talked about the absolute, that it was no longer going to be about civil rights. He spoke to the understanding that it was going to be about human rights. And there was going to be that tsunami, that unsettling force that would come upon the land. And it's going to take over, and that's what we, the people, are. And this unsettling force cannot lose this war on humanity. It's not just about democracy, it's about humanity.
And it's got to be, the force has got to be long-term. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. This is something where we can't mistake a setback for a defeat.
Yeah.
We have to continue to step forward and continue to lock hands and continue to walk one step at a time.
Yes.
And not be turned aside.
We cannot be moved. History shows us what happens when good people remain silent. The lessons of the Holocaust, the civil rights movement, and even today's struggle remind us that complacency is complicity. So where do we go from here? What must, and I do say must, be done? And this is absolutely something that has to happen. We must move forward. We've got to. I think that one of the first things is to stay informed. And the media can be a battlefield of misinformation. It makes us sick, but we have to seek out the truth, engage in things like we're doing today, in discussions, and educate ourselves and others. And then we've got to be extremely vigilant about advocating for policy changes.
And we have to get to know each other better.
Oh my God.
We're a bunch of individuals, and we're alone, and we're isolated, and we're scared, and we're lonely. And you're right next to me. We ought not to be isolated.
Well, you know,
we need each other.
It's hard for black people to trust folks that look like you.
Ha! You know, since I went gray, I feel like I look like a Karen. You know?
Honey, you'll never be a Karen.
Thank you.
Ariel suits
Good
you much
Lord.
best.
Thank you.
What do we do about that? I mean, because we've got relatives that are still dead. They're not going to wake up.
No,
so what do we do? Do we just stand on top of their bodies and start to shoot, or?
You know what? Everybody all throughout history, we're all standing on corpses. Mm-hmm. Right? But we don't stop living because they did.
Yeah.
And I feel like we have to still, if we still believe that love can win, then we have to model it, no matter what happened to us. If we believe that trust is the building block upon which love will triumph, then we have to find a way to trust each other, even though we've suffered.
And it's got to be a permanent thing. It's not
but I think it's a choice you make every day. I don't think you can make a permanent choice one day and expect to trust it forever. I think every day you...
I think what I mean is that we have to model it as if it's going to be permanent, not just something Black Lives Matter, and you got all of these signs in yards all across America. Yeah. I can't find two today.
It was the fad of the moment.
Oh my
now there's
God.
a different fad. Now there's another color.
That's another show.
Yeah, that's right. And it'll be over again too before you know it.
How do we support Ukrainian and Israeli communities? How do we do that?
Well, I want to say one thing about that, which is unless you speak Ukrainian and Russian, you don't really know what's going on there. You sure don't know it from watching the news here. If you don't speak Arabic and Hebrew, you don't really know what's going on there. So one of the most important things you can do is the same thing we need to do with each other right here in Portland and everywhere else, and that is to give people a little bit more benefit of the doubt, be a little less quick to rush to judgment of other situations that are very complex.
Yeah.
My heart breaks for every child. My heart breaks for every person who is killed, right? I refuse to try to minimize the pain of a Ukrainian or a Russian or a Gazan or an Israeli. If we start trying to take sides in ways that allow us to demonize, we become the thing we are fighting.
Whoa. We become the thing that we're fighting. That's why it's so important, I believe, for us to take our interfaith and remove it from the religiosity of politics, and engage in intercultural dialogue, and bringing with our leadership together a testament to the power of a collective action. So we've already done that. You formed the
Portland Interfaith Clergy Resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we kicked some butt, didn't we?
And it was the first interreligious organization that I've ever been a part of that was founded by Black, Jewish, queer, and I think maybe even there may have been a trans person involved.
Yes, there was.
Buddhist, Wiccan. It was one of the only groups I've ever been part of that wasn't top-heavy Christian white or male.
Yeah.
It was very powerful.
You know, for me, dealing with the Wiccan piece was was very difficult. I'm writing a book right now on unintentional witchcraft. The stuff that we do every day that's witchcraft to the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're under attack. The world is under, what do they call it? Political propaganda, when it's psychological warfare.
Yeah.
The weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but they're pulling down through mighty strongholds. Those strongholds is nothing but witchcraft, and we're going to have to pull that stuff down. But I think about it when I'm writing that book, and as we're entering into the stage of the fight, actually working with wickets.
Hey, you gotta know the ropes. Who's gonna know them better than the Wiccans?
And it was just an
There's a
odd
good
thing.
witch and a bad witch in the Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah, you know, they could do, but we've got to leave all of that on the ground.
That's right.
And say, what is our common humanity?
That's right.
And what is our shared humanity that says, wait a minute, beyond all of that, we've got to do what's right. Faith is a good thing, but faith without works, of course. Boy, we're quoting a lot of scripture today, aren't we?
You get two religious leaders
It's
together,
dead.
it's gonna happen.
We've got to move with conviction, both spiritually and socially. We just got to do the thing.
With love.
Rabbi Stone, I invite you to share your reflections on these thoughts as we get ready to go home. I want you to leave us and tell us what gives you hope in these dark times, number one. I'm going to lay it on heavy. And then what role does memory and history play in how we move forward? That's a big one for you. And what are young people in Ukraine and Israel teaching us about resilience? Because black people are resilient, as the Jew. So now what do our shared stories of resiliency bring us to clarity in the times that we're in now? Take it away.
What gives me hope in difficult times like this is the realization that hope can't be linked to the idea of winning.
Oh, wow.
We have to be able to have hope based on our sense of what is right and true, where the plumb line of moral clarity is for each of us. And we have to find our hope in sharing that clarity with others with whom we lock arms, find mutual shared meaning and support as we work together. But it cannot be based on the idea that we are going to see the end and that we're going to win.
Yeah.
You know, I may not get there with you, but one day we will get there.
Baby.
You got to know that your work has meaning even if you yourself don't get to see the end of it.
And
you can't just sit down, start whining, it's not fair. That's the resilience, I think. That's the piece that we need, is to learn that the goal is so much more important than the little things that happen to me along the way. Do you know who one of my heroes is?
Who's that?
Alexei Navalny.
Tell me.
Navalny was, he should rest in peace, he was the political rival to Vladimir Putin, who was sent to a camp and died.
Yes.
And he wrote a memoir, which was smuggled out of the camp he was sent to, in which he said, you know, it's not really about him. It's about the movement and about the people and about the clarity. And he understood. He understood that he was doing an important job and that it was within his power to create a very important message that would be all the more important if it outlived him.
Wow.
So I'm trying to learn from Alexei Navalny what it means to have hope even if you don't win the round.
I think that he and Martin had something in common.
Oh, I do believe so.
Thank you, Rabbi, for joining us today and for sharing your wisdom. It's always so good to see you. This is my sister, y'all, so I'm always
This is my brother, y'all.
I love you.
I love you.
To our listeners, let's remember that in these challenging times, our actions, however small they may seem, can ripple out to create waves of change. It's up to us. And until next time, keep striving, keep believing, and keep working for the better world. This is Mondays with Monday, and I'm signing off. And you've been listening to Rabbi Ariel Stone, all the way from the Ukraine to here in Portland, Oregon. Be sure you tune in next week for more insightful discussions and inspiring stories. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's work together for a better Portland. I need to pay the bills, okay? So a special shout out to our sponsors. Poshines, you ain't gonna get no better. This is the best soul food restaurant this side of the Willamette, located at 8139 North Denver in the Kenton District. And we've got Aunties and Tanties daycare services. They're supporting families, nurturing young minds, and turning up the heat on civility. Adorn Electric, they light up our lives, and they're lighting up our set right now. They can be the answer to your problem. You can visit me here on Sunday mornings at Celebration Tabernacle at 8139 North Denver. And I want to do a special thank you to our production team, Dion, Robin, Andy, and Paul. Not one of them is bigger than the other, and they all stand tall, but they're not as tall as me. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and followers. Turn on your notifications so that you never miss a thing from Mondays with Mondenay. And be sure to follow us on Facebook. Is it right there? Let me see. And then YouTube, is it right there? I see it. And then thank you for tuning in to Mondays with Mondenay, or Marmalade, or whatever it might be. It's just not about the music, people. It's about the message. It's about the seriousness of what's happening now. We are the unsettling force, and you and I and Rabbi Stone, we're the people that can do it. Let's keep the conversation going, and we need to keep it going one beat at a time. God bless you. See you next time. You know, I talk about a lot about knowing where you came from to know where you're going. Well, I came from the projects of St. Louis, Missouri, and I ended up into the majestic mountaintops of Portland, Oregon. It's been a wonderful journey, and Lewis and Clark took that journey from St. Louis to Portland, and I took it too. It talks about who I am, and as I'm with you often in cyberspace or on websites or on the, what do you call it, social media, I want you to know a little bit about me and who I am. This book talks about my fantasies, my failures, my triumphs, and more than that, it talks about the resiliency of being able to continue to go forward regardless of the odds. I'd get a copy. It's called From Maladies to Melodies. And I hope that you enjoy it and give me some feedback. God bless.
Hey, it's time for you to come to Post Shine. Check out that catfish sandwich. Oh my goodness, is that the shrimp po' boy? Man, look at that chocolate chip cake. Man, I need to get over to Post Shines at 8139 North Denver right now because this food looks delicious. Or call if you'd like, 503-978-9000. And don't miss it, you'll be sorry.
In times gone past, we find ourselves making excuses so that people reminded, ooh, I've got to get home and tend to the brand new missus. I need some time alone. Can't this wait until I finish texting on my phone?